What is the ultimate betrayal? Is it a whispered lie? A secret affair? Or is it something so brazen, so cold, it defies belief? This is the story of a tech millionaire, Adrian Davenport, a man who had everything, a brilliant wife, a child on the way, and a fortune built on an image of family and integrity. But while his wife Sophie was enduring the agony and miracle of childbirth, Adrian was on Madison Avenue celebrating a different kind of milestone. He was buying a $200,000 diamond ring for his mistress. He thought it was the perfect crime, a secret sealed in a velvet box. He never imagined that the one person selling him the ring knew his wife, and that she would burn his world to the ground. The air in the private suite at Lenox Hill Hospital was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the low rhythmic beeping of a fetal heart monitor. Each beep was a tiny, insistent drumbeat, counting down the seconds to a new life. For Sophie Davenport, each beep was also a reminder of her solitude. She arched her back, a wave of pain so intense it stole her breath and blurred the edges of the chic hotel-like room. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the bed rail. "Just breathe through it, honey." "In through your nose, out through your mouth," her mother Carol coached from a chair by the window, her face a mask of loving concern. Sophie tried, but the breath hitched in her throat. Where was he? Where was Adrian? She glanced at her phone, dark, on the bedside table. His last text, sent 2 hours ago, was a masterpiece of corporate non-commitment. "Closing a massive deal, babe." "Unavoidable. We'll be there as soon as I can. You're a warrior, a warrior." He made it sound like she was leading a hostile takeover, not bringing their son into the world. Adrian Davenport, CEO of the billion-dollar data security firm, Tech, saw everything through the lens of a transaction. Their marriage, their home on the Upper East Side, even this baby. It was all part of the portfolio, the carefully curated image of a successful, stable family man. An image that was Sophie was beginning to fear, as hollow as the promises he whispered in the dark. Another contraction seized her, and she squeezed her eyes shut, picturing his face, the handsome, chiseled face that charmed investors and graced the covers of business magazines, the face that hadn't looked at her with genuine warmth in months. He was always busy, always closing a deal, always just out of reach. The physical distance between his downtown office and this uptown hospital felt like a chasm. He should be here. Sophie gasped, the words wrenched from her. "I know, sweetie. I know," Carol soothed, dabbing Sophie's forehead with a cool cloth. "Men like Adrian, they operate on a different frequency." That was the kindest way to put it. Miles away in the heart of the financial district, Adrian Davenport clicked his phone shut and tossed it onto the passenger seat of his Aston Martin DB11. The engine purred a low growl of contained power that mirrored his own sense of triumphant adrenaline. The massive deal was a fiction. The real call he'd just finished was with Crystal Monroe. "I'm on my way, Angel," he'd murmured, his voice a low, intimate rumble. "Wear that red dress I like, the one that's impossible to ignore." Crystal's giggle was like champagne bubbles over the line. "Anything for my man. I've got a surprise for you, too." "I'm sure you do," he'd said, a smirk playing on his lips. He navigated the labyrinth of lower Manhattan with an impatient, practiced ease. Guilt, the thought was laughable. Sophie was strong. She had her mother. She had the best doctors money could buy. What was he going to do? Hold her hand and say encouraging things. It was a biological process, a messy one. He'd be there for the photo op, the triumphant arrival of the Davenport heir. That's what mattered. His real focus was on Crystal. She was his escape, his reward. A 24-year-old model with legs that started on Tuesday and a mind blissfully unburdened by thoughts of interest rates or market caps. She was the human equivalent of his sports car, sleek, expensive, and thrillingly uncomplicated. Sophie, with her background in art history and her quiet, observant nature, had been the perfect partner for his ascent. She was class, pedigree, stability. But Crystal was the spoils of war. He pulled up in front of her Soho apartment building, the car's metallic graphite paint gleaming under the late afternoon sun. She was waiting a vision in crimson silk. She slid into the car, bringing with her a cloud of heady perfume and the electric charge of her presence. "Hello, handsome," she purred, leaning over to kiss him. Her lips were soft, her kiss hungry. "Where are you taking me?" "Madison Avenue," Adrian said, pulling smoothly into traffic. "I think it's time we celebrated our 6-month anniversary." Her eyes, a calculated shade of sapphire blue, widened. "Oh, Addie, you didn't have to." "Of course I did," he said, his hand finding her silk-clad thigh. "A woman like you deserves to be decorated." He felt a vibration in his pocket, a text from his mother-in-law. "Contractions are 5 minutes apart. The doctor thinks it will be soon. Please hurry, Adrian." He glanced at it and slipped the phone back into his pocket, his hand returning to Crystal's leg. Some things could wait. This celebration, this monument to his own success and virility, felt far more urgent. He was on top of the world. He was invincible. Nothing could touch him. He was a millionaire buying a prize for his mistress while his wife was in labor, and the thought, instead of filling him with shame, gave him a dark, intoxicating thrill. He was a king, and today he would anoint his queen. The name on the discreet forest green awning read Dubois & Fils, a testament to a century of quiet elegance on Madison Avenue. Inside, the world was hushed. The frantic pulse of New York City faded away, replaced by the soft glow of recessed lighting on glass cases and the plush silence of a thick Aubusson carpet. This was a sanctuary of legacy where fortunes were translated into facets and love was measured in carats. Genevieve Dubois stood behind a polished mahogany counter, her jeweler's loop hanging from a silk cord around her neck. She was a woman who seemed to be carved from the same material as her surroundings, refined, timeless, and possessing an inner strength that was as unyielding as the diamonds she curated. She had inherited the business not from a father or a son, as the name suggested, but from her grandfather, and she ran it with a precision and passion that had made the Dubois name even more legendary. The chime of the door was delicate, but it carried the weight of new money. Genevieve looked up, her professionally welcoming smile freezing for a microsecond. She recognized the man instantly, Adrian Davenport. She'd seen him dozens of times in photos standing beside her dearest friend Sophie, at charity galas, in vacation pictures, and at their wedding. She had been Sophie's maid of honor, and the woman clinging to his arm was not Sophie. This woman was a confection of crimson and gold. Her dress was impossibly tight, her blonde hair impossibly bright, her lips impossibly full. She scanned the room with a covetous gleam in her eye, a predator entering a new hunting ground. Genevieve's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of professional decorum. Sophie was due any day now. She had spoken to her just yesterday morning. "I'm so nervous," Sophie had confided, her voice tight with anxiety. "Adrian is so wrapped up in the Aura Tech launch. I feel like I'm going through this alone." And here he was, not alone. "Good afternoon," Genevieve said, her voice smooth as velvet, betraying none of the acid churning in her stomach. "Welcome to Dubois & Fils. How may I help you?" "We're looking for a ring," Adrian announced, his voice booming with the unearned confidence of a man used to buying whatever he wanted. Something significant. The blonde who introduced herself as Crystal drifted towards a display case. "Ooh, Addy, look at this one," she squealed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at a large, rather garish yellow diamond. Genevieve had to resist the urge to roll her eyes. It was the loudest piece in the store, designed for exactly this type of client. "It's nice," Adrian said dismissively, "but I want something unique. A statement piece." Price is not an object. He said it loudly for the benefit of Crystal, and Genevieve suspected for his own ego. A cold, dangerous idea began to form in the back of Genevieve's mind. It was a terrible, unprofessional, and utterly brilliant idea. She thought of Sophie alone in a hospital room, her body being torn apart to bring this man's son into the world. And she thought of the conversation she and Sophie had had months ago right here in this very showroom. "If you could have any piece, Soph, which would it be?" Genevieve had asked, swirling a glass of champagne to celebrate Sophie's first trimester. Sophie had drifted over to a special display, a single ring on a bed of black velvet. It was a breathtaking, custom-designed piece. A flawless 5-carat cushion-cut diamond flanked by 2 rare shield-cut sapphires, the color of a twilight sky. It was elegant, powerful, and unique. That one Sophie had breathed, her eyes shining. It's not just a ring, it's a work of art. It's perfectly balanced, strong and beautiful at the same time. "I call it the Star of Ilara," Genevieve had said. "It's my masterpiece. It's waiting for the right person." Now Genevieve walked calmly to that very display. Perhaps, she said, her voice a low conspiratorial murmur, "You're looking for something like this." She placed the velvet box on the counter and opened it. The ring seemed to inhale all the light in the room and exhale it as pure fire. Even Crystal was momentarily silenced. "Wow," Crystal finally managed. "Adé, that's the one," Adrian said, his eyes fixed on the diamond. He saw a trophy, a symbol of his power. He didn't see the art, the balance, the soul that Sophie had seen. "This is a one-of-a-kind piece," Genevieve explained, her heart pounding. This was the point of no return. "It's called the Star of Ilara. A cushion-cut, D-flawless diamond, 5.3 carats. The side stones are cashmere sapphires, almost impossible to source now. The design is exclusive to our house. How much?" Adrian asked, already reaching for his wallet. $200,000, Genevieve said, watching his face. He didn't even blink. "We'll take it," he said. "I want it engraved," Crystal chirped, holding out her hand so Adrian could slide the ring onto her finger. It looked absurdly large and out of place. Something special. Adrian leaned in close to her, his voice a low murmur that Genevieve could still hear perfectly. "How about, to my one and only, KM?" Crystal beamed. "I love it." Genevieve felt a wave of nausea. His one and only, while his wife was in labor. The sheer breathtaking cruelty of it solidified her resolve. She was no longer just Sophie's friend. She was her avenging angel. Of course, Genevieve said, her pen poised over a receipt. "The engraving will take about an hour. You can come back for it, or I can have it couriered to you this evening." She needed the time. "We'll come back," Adrian said. "Gives us time for a celebratory drink." As they turned to leave, Crystal practically skipping, Adrian paused and handed Genevieve his black, ridiculously exclusive credit card. "Adrian Davenport," he said, as if she didn't know. "Of course, Mr. Davenport," she replied, taking the card. Her hand was perfectly steady. "I'll have the ring and all the paperwork ready for you when you return." The paperwork, the receipt with his name, the date, the time, the description of the ring, and the custom inscription. The security camera footage, crystal clear, showing him fawning over his mistress. She would make copies of everything. She would document this betrayal in a way that no lawyer, no board of directors, and no public relations team could ever spin. As the door chimed behind them, Genevieve let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She looked at the ring, Sophie's dream ring, sitting on the counter. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a weapon, and she knew exactly how to use it. The world had shrunk to the four walls of the delivery room. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor had been replaced by a chaotic symphony of her own ragged breaths, the urgent murmur of the doctor, and her mother's constant whispered encouragement. Sophie was in the eye of the storm, a place of primal, all-consuming effort, where time ceased to exist. The memory of Adrian, his empty promises, and his damning absence had been burned away by the sheer searing force of bringing a new life into the world. There was a final desperate push, a cry that was part agony and part triumph, and then a sudden shocking silence. It was followed by a new sound, a sound that recalibrated her entire universe, the thin, furious wail of her son. "He's here, Sophie. He's perfect." Carol sobbed her voice, thick with joy and relief. The doctor laid the small, squirming, surprisingly heavy baby on her chest. Sophie looked down through a blur of sweat and tears at the tiny wrinkled face, the shock of dark hair, the impossibly small fingers curled into a fist. A wave of love, so fierce and protective, washed over her. It was like a physical blow. It scoured her clean of everything else. In that moment, there was no Adrian, no Aura Tech, no lonely apartment, no betrayal. There was only this child, her child. William, she whispered the name they had chosen together in what felt like another lifetime. "Hello, William." She lay there for what could have been minutes or hours, lost in the wonder of her newborn son, the weight of him on her chest, a grounding, centering force. The nurses bustled around her, their movements efficient and kind. Her mother made the obligatory calls to family, her voice trembling with happiness. It was during a quiet lull as William slept against her skin that Carol came back to her bedside, her phone in her hand, and a strange, troubled look on her face. "Sweetie," she began hesitantly, "that was a strange call. From your friend, Genevieve." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Jen, is everything okay?" She seemed insistent. "She said she couldn't reach you, so she called me. She said to give you a message, but it didn't make any sense." Carol looked down at the note she'd scribbled. She said, "Tell Sophie the Star of Ilara has been sold. And tell her I'm so sorry." Sophie stared at her mother, but she wasn't seeing her. She was seeing the inside of Genevieve's showroom. She was seeing a ring on a bed of black velvet, a flawless diamond between two twilight blue sapphires, strong and beautiful at the same time. Her dream ring, a silly secret wish she'd shared only with her best friend. "The Star of Ilara has been sold. I'm so sorry." The words clicked into place with the sickening finality of a coffin lid shutting. Genevieve wouldn't call with a cryptic, apologetic message about selling a piece of inventory unless the buyer was significant. Unless the buyer was Adrian. And he wouldn't be buying a $200,000 ring for her as a surprise. He didn't have that kind of thoughtfulness in him, not anymore. Which meant he had bought it for someone else. The realization hit her, not with the hot flash of anger she might have expected, but with an icy, creeping cold that started in her gut and spread through her veins. He wasn't just late. He wasn't just closing a deal. While she was here in this room going through the most profound and painful experience of her life, he was out buying a monument to his infidelity. And not just any monument. He had bought her ring, the one peace in the world that she had secretly coveted. It was a violation so specific, so deeply personal, it was almost poetic in its cruelty. He hadn't just cheated on her, he had plundered her dreams to decorate his mistress. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. But as she looked down at the sleeping child on her chest, something shifted. The fierce, protective love she'd felt at his birth began to crystallize into something harder. Steely resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about William. What kind of life would her son have with a father capable of such casual, profound cruelty? What kind of man would William become if he was raised in a house built on a foundation of lies? The tears stopped. The heartbreak, though immense, was superseded by a cold, clear certainty. The marriage was over. The image Adrian had so carefully curated was a fraud, and she would no longer be a part of it. She took a deep, shuddering breath and looked at her mother, whose face was a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Mum, Sophie said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Hand me my phone. I need to make a call. Not to Adrian, to my lawyer." Carol's eyes widened, but she saw the new, unbreakable strength in her daughter's gaze. She saw the shift from wife to mother, from victim to warrior. She wordlessly passed the phone to Sophie. Sophie's fingers moved deftly over the screen. She had a new purpose now. It was no longer about saving her marriage. It was about ending it. And she wouldn't just end it. She would do it on her own terms. Adrian Davenport, the master of control and image, was about to find out what happened when the most valuable asset in his portfolio decided to liquidate. She held her son a little tighter. Her bond with him had been forged in the fire of childbirth. Her resolve was now being forged in the ice of betrayal. 2 hours later, Adrian Davenport strolled into the hospital suite, a portrait of contrived paternal joy. He carried a ridiculously large bouquet of white lilies and a small, elegantly wrapped box from Cartier. He had timed his arrival perfectly, or so he thought after the mess, but in time for the glory. "There's my champion," he boomed, striding over to the bed. He leaned down to kiss Sophie, but she turned her head slightly, so his lips landed on her cheek. He barely noticed his eyes already on the bassinet. "And there he is," he said, peering down at William. "The next CAO of Auratech. He has the Davenport chin." He beamed, a man thoroughly pleased with his own creation. Sophie watched him, a scientist observing a particularly odious specimen under a microscope. The love she'd once felt for him had been cauterized, leaving behind only a barren, aching scar. In its place was a chilling clarity. She saw every false note in his performance, every self-congratulatory gleam in his eye. "His name is William," she said, her voice flat. "William Davenport. Strong name. I like it." Adrian nodded approvingly. He then turned to her, presenting the Cartier box with a flourish. "A little something for all your hard work. A push present, I believe they call it." Sophie opened it. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet. It was beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal. It was the kind of gift a man gives when he wants to tick a box, a transactional offering for services rendered. A year ago, she might have gushed. Now she felt nothing but a hollow echo. "Thank you, Adrian," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. She set the box on the bedside table, next to her untouched cup of tea. Adrian frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He had expected tears of gratitude, effusive praise. Sophie's cool detachment was unsettling. "Are you okay? You seem tired." "I just gave birth." She said the words like chips of ice. "I am tired." He backed off, attributing her mood to hormones and exhaustion. He spent the next hour taking photos, posting a carefully worded announcement on his social media about being humbled and overjoyed to welcome his son and fielding congratulatory calls from his board members. He was performing the role of the proud new father, and Sophie let him. She watched, she listened, and with every fake smile and self-important pronouncement, the fire of her resolve burned hotter. A confrontation here, in the sanctity of this room where her son was born, would be a desecration. It would be messy, emotional. It would be on his terms. No, her revenge would be like her pain, cold, precise, and utterly devastating. It would not be an emotional outburst. It would be a strategic demolition. The next day, a discreet courier package arrived for Sophie at the hospital. It was from Genevieve. Inside, there was no note. None was needed. There was a slim USB drive and a set of high-resolution glossy prints. Sophie plugged the drive into her laptop. It contained everything. The full time-stamped security footage of Adrian and Crystal in the showroom. Close-ups of Crystal trying on the ring, her face alight with avarice. Audio of Adrian dictating the inscription, "To my one and only, KM." There was also a scanned copy of the final receipt, Dubois and Fils, sold to Adrian Davenport. Item, the Star of Ilara custom ring. Total, 250 euros. The final damning detail was a high-definition photograph Genevieve had taken of the finished ring before Adrian picked it up, the cruel inscription clearly visible on the inner band. Sophie printed everything and placed the documents and photos in a large manila envelope. When her lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Melinda Stone, arrived that afternoon, Sophie handed it to her. "I want to file for divorce," Sophie said, her voice calm and resolute. "I want full custody of William the apartment and a settlement that reflects his gross infidelity and the emotional distress caused by the specific nature of his betrayal." Melinda looked through the contents of the envelope, her eyebrows rising higher with each page. She looked from the photo of the ring to the receipt to the picture of Adrian with his arm around the blonde. Sophie Melinda said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "This isn't just grounds for divorce. This is a corporate execution. The man built his brand on family values. This is dynamite, I know," Sophie said, "and I want to be the one to light the fuse. But not yet. I want to do it in a place where it will do the most damage." An idea began to form. Adrian's biggest event of the year was the annual Auratech Foundation Charity Gala, a self-congratulatory affair where he paraded his success and philanthropy in front of the city's elite investors and the press. It was in 3 weeks, the gala. Sophie said, a glint in her eye that Melinda had never seen before. "He'll be on stage talking about legacy and family and the future he's building for his son." Melinda caught on instantly. "And you'll be there to provide an addendum." "Exactly," Sophie confirmed. For the next 3 weeks, Sophie played the part of the devoted, if tired, new mother. She went home from the hospital. She arranged the nursery. She allowed Adrian to play the doting father for the cameras and his family. He mistook her silence for forgiveness, her compliance for weakness. He had no idea that he wasn't living in a peaceful home. He was living on a timed explosive. Sophie, with the help of Genevieve and Melinda, was planning every detail of the unveiling, from the technical setup to the legal fallout. She was no longer just a wife or a mother. She was becoming the architect of her own liberation. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a glittering spectacle of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tables laden with orchids and champagne flutes. The air hummed with the conversation of New York's financial titans, tech moguls, and socialites. This was Adrian Davenport's kingdom, and the Auratech Foundation Charity Gala was his coronation. He stood at the podium on the grand stage, bathed in a warm spotlight. A massive screen behind him displayed the Auratech logo over a soft focus image of a happy, generic family. He was in his element, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity as he spoke of corporate responsibility, of building a better future of legacy. "And when I look at the future," he said, his voice swelling with emotion, "I no longer see just data points and market shares. I see the face of my son, William." A murmur of approval went through the crowd. "Everything I do now, every success we achieve at Auratech, is to build a legacy of integrity and strength for him. It is for my family." He paused for effect, letting the applause wash over him. It was at that moment, as the sound began to subside, that a side door opened. A collective gasp rippled through the front rows. Sophie Davenport stood there, a vision in an emerald green gown that highlighted the fire in her auburn hair. She was not the pale, exhausted new mother Adrian had left at home. She looked regal, powerful, and utterly serene. In her arms she held a sleeping baby, William wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Adrian froze his smile, faltering. What was she doing here? She was supposed to be at home. With a calm, deliberate grace, Sophie walked towards the stage, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She handed William to a woman Adrian recognized as her mother, who was waiting discreetly near the front, then ascended the few stairs to the stage. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. "Adrian, darling," Sophie said, her voice amplified by the microphone he'd just been using. It was smooth as silk, yet carried a deadly chill. "That was a beautiful speech. About legacy. About family." She walked to his side, placing a hand on his arm. He could feel the tension in her grip, a current of pure electricity. He tried to smile to play it off, but his face felt stiff, a plastic mask. "You're so right," she continued, addressing the silent, captivated audience. "Legacy is everything, and so are the gifts that celebrate it. Adrian has been so generous. He gave me this lovely bracelet when William was born." She gestured to the Cartier piece on her wrist. "But he was even more generous with his other gifts." Adrian's blood ran cold. He knew with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty what was about to happen. "He believes in celebrating milestones," Sophie said, her voice unwavering. "For example, just 3 weeks ago, while I was in labor, bringing our son into the world, Adrian was celebrating a very special 6-month anniversary. He marked the occasion with a truly spectacular gift." She gestured to the tech booth at the back of the room. On the massive screen behind them, the Auratech logo dissolved. It was replaced by a crystal-clear high-definition image. It was security footage from Dubois and Fils. It showed Adrian, his arm draped possessively around Crystal Monroe, who was preening for him in her tight red dress. The crowd gasped. People pulled out their phones, the small red lights of recording buttons blinking to life all over the ballroom. "He bought a ring," Sophie's voice narrated calmly, as the image on the screen changed to a professional photograph of the Star of Ilara. A one-of-a-kind piece, a symbol of devotion. The screen changed again this time to a close-up of the sales receipt. Adrian Davenport's name was clearly visible. The date, the day William was born. The total, 217,750 pounds. A low, shocked murmur spread through the room like a virus. Adrian's board members stared, their faces ashen. But the most touching part, Sophie said, her voice dripping with lethal sarcasm, is the personal inscription he chose. The final image filled the screen. A macro shot of the inside of the ring's band, the elegant script perfectly legible. "To my one and only. K.M." In the audience, Crystal Monroe, who had been seated at a minor table in the back, turned white and tried to sink into her chair. But it was too late. All eyes were on the screen, then on Adrian, then flicking around the room to find the mysterious KM. Adrian stood paralyzed, his face a mottled canvas of disbelief and fury. He looked utterly destroyed, exposed and humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to his world. "So I'd like to thank my husband for this lesson in integrity." Sophie concluded, her voice ringing with clarity and power. "He has shown me exactly what his legacy is worth. And it's not a legacy I want for my son." She turned to look directly at him, her eyes burning with a cold fire he had never seen before. "My lawyer has already filed the divorce papers, Adrian, citing adultery. We have all the evidence we need, as you can see. Enjoy your party." With that, she turned her back on him, walked off the stage, collected her son from her mother, and without a single backward glance, exited the ballroom. She left behind a maelstrom of chaos. Reporters were shouting, investors were staring at Adrian with open contempt, and the symphony of his meticulously constructed life was crashing down around him in a deafening crescendo of consequences. 6 months later, the dust had not so much settled as it had been swept away by a hurricane of change. The fallout from the Auratech gala was immediate and brutal. The video of Sophie's speech, captured on 100 iPhones, went viral within hours. Davenport's downfall became a trending topic. The Auratech board, facing a PR nightmare and a stock price in freefall, convened an emergency meeting. Adrian was forced to resign as CAO, his name and image now irrevocably tarnished. His personal life was an even greater wreck. The divorce was swift and merciless. Armed with the irrefutable evidence Genevieve had provided, Melinda Stone had torn through Adrian's assets. Sophie received the Upper East Side apartment, a financial settlement that would ensure she and William would never want for anything, and most importantly, sole custody of their son. Adrian was a pariah, shunned by the very society he had tried so desperately to conquer. He had lost his company, his wife, his son's respect before he could even earn it, and his reputation. Crystal Monroe had disappeared from his life the night of the gala, selling the infamous ring to a discreet pawnbroker on 47th Street for a fraction of its value before leaving the city. For Sophie, the world had been reborn in vibrant color. She had sold the cavernous, impersonal apartment Adrian had bought and moved into a sun-drenched brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. The walls were filled not with investment art, but with photographs of William, her own paintings and pieces from friends. She had rediscovered the woman she was before Adrian Davenport, intelligent, creative, and passionate. Drawing on her art history background and her impeccable taste, she launched a small but highly successful art consultancy firm, helping new collectors navigate the gallery world with integrity and insight. Her days were filled with the joyful chaos of raising her son, the intellectual stimulation of her work, and the warm comfort of true friendship. One bright autumn afternoon, she was sitting at an outdoor cafe, a sketchbook open on the table, as William napped peacefully in his stroller beside her. Genevieve slid into the chair opposite, placing 2 coffees on the table. "Look at you," Genevieve said, her smile genuine and warm. "You look happy." "I am," Sophie said, and the simple truth of the statement felt like a miracle. "Truly happy. And I owe so much of it to you, Jenin." "Nonsense." Genevieve waved a hand dismissively, though her eyes shone with pride. "You saved yourself. I just handed you the key." She paused, then reached into her handbag and pulled out a familiar, dark green velvet box. She pushed it across the table towards Sophie. Sophie's breath caught. She knew what it was. She opened it slowly. There, nestled on the velvet, was the star of Ilara. It still seemed to capture all the light in the world, but it looked different to her now. The fire in the diamond, and the deep blue of the sapphires no longer felt like a stolen dream. How Sophie whispered. "I have my sources," Genevieve said with a small smile. "A colleague in the diamond district knew the piece was mine. He called me when a panicked blonde came in to sell it. I bought it back. I had the inscription removed. It's clean now." Sophie stared at the ring. It was a piece of art that had been caught in the crossfire of a terrible betrayal. It had been a weapon, a piece of evidence, a symbol of everything she had lost. But looking at it now, she saw something else. She saw the strength of her friendship with Genevieve. She saw the moment she chose to fight for her son's future instead of crying over a broken marriage. She saw the courage it took to walk onto that stage and reclaim her own story. "I can't accept this, Jen," Sophie said, trying to push the box back. "It was always meant for you," Sophie Genevieve insisted. "It was waiting for the right person, not the wife of a millionaire, but the strong, incredible woman sitting in front of me now. It's not a symbol of what he did. It's a symbol of what you overcame." Sophie looked from the ring to her sleeping son, his small chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. Genevieve was right. The ring's story hadn't ended with Adrian's betrayal. It was just beginning. She slipped the ring onto the fourth finger of her right hand. It fit perfectly. It wasn't a symbol of a marriage, but a declaration of her own worth. One day, she would tell William the whole story, the story of a terrible heartbreak, a fierce friendship, and how this beautiful shining object became the catalyst for building their new, happy life, a legacy of true integrity forged in the ashes of a lie. 2 years passed. In the relentless churn of New York City, 2 years is an eternity. Scandals fade, fortunes shift, and lives are rebuilt on the rubble of what came before. For Sophie Davenport, these 2 years had been a renaissance. Her art consultancy, Davenport and Dubois Fine Art Advisory, a partnership she insisted on to honor Genevieve's role in her liberation, was thriving. She had become a respected name in the art world, known for her keen eye, her fierce integrity, and her unwavering support of emerging artists. Her brownstone was a home filled with laughter light and the happy babbling of her son William, a bright, curious toddler with his mother's auburn hair and a smile that could melt glaciers. Adrian Davenport, on the other hand, had become a ghost. A cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. After his public immolation, he had retreated from the city, selling his remaining assets and living in a state of self-imposed exile in a sterile glass house in the Hamptons. He was a king without a kingdom, a man whose identity had been so intrinsically linked to his success that its absence had left him hollow. He had his court-ordered supervised visits with William, stilted awkward affairs in a neutral playroom monitored by a court-appointed social worker. He was a stranger to his own son. The past, however, is never truly gone. It lingers in echoes waiting for a moment of quiet to make itself heard. The quiet moment came in the form of a legal letter. Adrian was petitioning the court to modify their custody agreement. He wanted unsupervised weekend visits. He wanted to be a father. Sophie's initial reaction was a cold dread, the muscle memory of past betrayals. But it was quickly replaced by the calm, protective resolve that was now her default state. This was not about her and Adrian anymore. This was about William. Her lawyer, Melinda Stone, advised a meeting. "Let's see what he has to say, Sophie. Let him make his case to you first. It shows the court you're being reasonable, and it gives us a measure of the man he is now." She agreed. A neutral location was chosen, the cafe in the lobby of the Lowell Hotel. It was quiet, discreet, and achingly familiar. It was a place they had gone for celebratory brunches in the early days of their marriage a lifetime ago. Sophie arrived first, choosing a small table in a secluded corner. She was dressed in a tailored navy blue blazer, cream silk blouse, and trousers her work uniform, a quiet armor of competence. On her right hand, the star of Ilara caught the soft light, sending out sparks of blue and white fire. It was a part of her now, a constant, tangible reminder of her own resilience. She felt no anxiety, only a strange, detached curiosity. Who was the man she was about to meet? He arrived 5 minutes later, and the change in him was jarring. The swagger was gone. The bespoke suit he wore, though still expensive, seemed a size too large for his frame. He was thinner, and the sharp lines of his face had been softened by a perpetual weariness. The predatory gleam in his eyes had been replaced by a haunted, hollow look. He looked diminished. Sophie, he said, his voice, softer than she remembered, almost hesitant. He slid into the chair opposite her. Adrian, she replied, her tone polite but cool. She didn't offer a smile. Thank you for meeting me. A waiter appeared, and the awkwardness was palpable as they both ordered coffee. For a few moments they sat in a silence, thick with unspoken history. He broke it first. You look well. Very well. It was an attempt at his old charm, but it fell flat, a ghost of a gesture. I am well, she said simply. My life is full. William is thriving. She went straight to the point. Melinda received the petition from your lawyer. I have to be honest, Adrian. I have serious reservations. He flinched slightly at her directness, but nodded as if expecting it. I know. I understand why you would. But I've changed, Sophie. The last 2 years, they've been instructive. Instructive how she asked, her gaze unwavering. This was not a social call, it was an evaluation. I lost everything he said, looking down at his hands on the table. The company, the money, the respect. I thought those things were me. I spent my whole life building that facade, and when it crumbled there was nothing left underneath, just emptiness. He looked up, and for the first time she saw something raw and genuine in his eyes. I had to sit in that emptiness. I went to therapy. I read books that weren't quarterly reports. I did the work. I know how pathetic that sounds. It doesn't sound pathetic. Sophie interrupted, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. It sounds necessary, but it doesn't automatically make you ready to be an unsupervised parent to a 2-year-old. I know that, he said quickly. But Sophie, he's my son. I see him for 2 hours every other week in a room full of plastic toys with a stranger taking notes. I'm a line item in his life. I want to show him the ocean. I want to teach him how to throw a ball. I want him to know that his father loves him, that I'm not the monster you showed the world I was. The word monster hung in the air between them. It was the first time he had ever come close to acknowledging the depth of his actions. The world saw what you did, Adrian, Sophie said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but losing none of its steel. I didn't create the monster. I just pulled back the curtain. You were buying a ring for your mistress while I was giving birth. You took something I loved, a dream I'd shared with my best friend, and you gave it to her. Do you have any idea what that feels like? The level of violation, he visibly deflated the last of his composure, crumbling. I do now, he said, his voice cracking. At the time, I was so arrogant, so high on my own success, I thought I was untouchable. I thought you were just another part of my portfolio. The wife asset. Stable, reliable, always there. He shook his head, a look of self-disgust on his face. I never saw you, Sophie. I never saw your heart, or your passions, or your dreams. I was jealous of them, I think. You had this whole inner world with your art and your books that I couldn't access, couldn't buy. So I ignored it. I devalued it. It was easier than admitting I was the one who was empty. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her. The confession laid bare the sad, pathetic truth of their marriage. He hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been a spiritual void. She took a slow sip of her coffee, processing his words. The anger she had held for so long had long since cooled to an ember, and his confession seemed to finally extinguish it, leaving only a fine, grey ash of pity. "I appreciate your honesty, Adrian. Truly," she said. "But William's stability is my only priority. His world is safe and predictable. He is happy. I won't risk that on your newfound self-awareness. You have to earn it. Not with words, but with actions. Over time, a long time." He looked defeated, knowing she was right. His gaze drifted down to her hand, resting on the table. He froze. His eyes widened in disbelief, fixing on the magnificent ring that adorned her right hand. "Is that—" He breathed, unable to finish the sentence. His face was a mask of confusion and pain. To him, that ring was the ultimate symbol of his downfall, the catalyst for his public execution. He couldn't comprehend why she would wear it. Why? Why would you wear that to remind me, to punish me? Sophie looked down at the ring, turning her hand so the facets caught the light. A small, serene smile touched her lips. "Oh, Adrian," she said, and her voice was not unkind. It was the voice of a teacher explaining a simple fundamental truth to a slow student. "You still don't get it, do you? This has nothing to do with you anymore." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes meeting his. "You think this ring is about your betrayal, about your mistress, about your lies, but you're just a footnote in this ring's story now. You think you gave this ring to a woman, you never possessed it. You just transferred funds. You were merely the broker in its journey to its rightful owner." She held up her hand. "Genevieve gave me this ring. My courage gave me this ring. The life I built for my son out of the wreckage of the one you tried to destroy gave me this ring. It doesn't symbolize your sin. It symbolizes my salvation. Every time I look at it, I'm not reminded of your weakness. I'm reminded of my strength. I'm reminded that my happiness, my security, and my legacy are things I build with my own 2 hands, not things a man signs a check for." Adrian stared at her, utterly silenced. He was seeing her for the first time, not as his wife, not as the mother of his child, but as a complete and sovereign person, untouchable and whole without him. The last vestige of power he thought he held over her, the power of their shared traumatic history, had just evaporated. She had taken the very weapon he had used against her and reforged it into her own crown. He slowly nodded, a final profound understanding dawning in his hollow eyes. "I see," he whispered. He stood up, leaving his untouched coffee on the table. "You're right. I'm not ready. I'll tell my lawyer to withdraw the petition. I'll keep doing the work." And with that, he turned and walked away, not the titan of industry she had married, but a chastened man finally beginning to grasp the true meaning of legacy. Sophie watched him go, then took a final sip of her coffee. She felt no triumph, no surge of victory. She simply felt peace. The last echo had faded. The final ember had gone cold. She paid for the coffees, walked out of the hotel into the bright afternoon sun, and headed home to her son, her future, brilliant and limitless, and entirely her own. The story of Sophie Davenport isn't just about infidelity. It's a powerful testament to the fact that our lowest moments can become the foundation for our greatest strengths. It shows that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or carats, but in courage, integrity, and the unbreakable bonds of real friendship. Sophie's journey from a heartbroken wife to a triumphant architect of her own life reminds us that we all have the power to rewrite our own narratives, to turn symbols of pain into badges of honor. If this story of resilience and ultimate justice resonated with you, please help us share it. Give this video a like to show your support for stories of strength, and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own power. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life story. What did you think of Sophie's revenge? Let us know in the comments below.